Hey everybody, ARB has released their locker for the INEOS Grenadier. We have some that we're going to be putting on our Grenadier. We're going to be also re-gearing it. Wanted to point out some of the differences, if there are any, as well as you can see the open carrier versus the factory lock carrier versus the ARB. For the most part, a lot of these parts have to be the same in aspects of where the ring and pinion bolts up, how that attaches, also your axle size. So things like, like a side gear. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start at this side over here. This is gonna be the open carrier. So for those of you that want to put in the locking differential, you've got open carriers in your Grenadier. That's one of the big reasons why ARB came out with them. There's a significant amount of Grenadiers out there that do not have the rough pack. Without the rough pack, you don't have lockers. So let's take a look at the open carrier. Each one of these will come with a ductile cast iron housing. I believe it's used across the board on all of these, but ring gear is going to bolt up to here. And then you're going to have side gears in here. Here's an example of one of the side gears. And then here's your pinion gears or your spider gears. So in the case of this one, you're going to see some differences between this and the E-Locker. So you can see that these gears are fairly large. And you've also got, I believe this is a 22 millimeter pin in there. And then you're also going to have this cage, and that cage supports all of the pinion gears. So, and it's also 4-pinion. For those of you not familiar with differentials, you can get differentials that only have 2. 4 is going to be stronger than 2. Okay, so we've got these large shafts going through here, and you got your side gears. Probably for manufacturing, these are centered components, and either that or they could be net forged. We're assuming that they're centered, and in this case, they're basically powdered metal that is compressed together under heat. They can get their particular shape they need. They'll have like a thrust washer in the back. Pretty well made. This is the one from Carrillo. And obviously Carrillo makes the axle, so they really have this thing kind of set up for it. Now, when we go over here to the E-Locker, we'll spend a little bit more time in the E-Locker because it's got a few more things going on. But if you look at the E-Locker, again, you're gonna have your ductile cast iron housing, and then you're gonna have your component for locking and unlocking it. You're gonna still have your pinions. You're also gonna notice that the shaft on this is substantially smaller. Is 17 millimeter. As well, instead of it having a cage around it like this one, it just kind of puts them in there and it cuts into here. I believe that was, gosh, it was almost less than 10 millimeters. Yeah, 9.25 millimeters. So if there's a weak link in here, it could potentially be this. Obviously, the spider gears are a bit smaller. Here's your locking mechanism. Now these are, we believe that they're net forged. So net forged is, there's a lot less waste involved in it. You're gonna see that. It's a little bit more of a technical forging process where, say like a drop forged part would be, they'd stamp it out and then there'd be a ton of slag and waste. They have to clear it away. This one's a little bit more precise. So good components in them. And we'll kind of throw this thing together so you can see how it operates. All of these are gonna have the same kind of ID for the axle, obviously, right? But then you can see how, gosh, look at how much bigger this part is. And then also the mass that this has. So a part that has more mass, it's gonna be stronger, right? Now, this is possibly a centered component. Could be not as good a process as net forging, but it makes up for it in the mass. So again, this is off the open, and this is off if you're locking off your E-Lock. So let me put this together. This guy drops down into here. Okay, it's a little bit tighter in here. The smaller components fit in there. Here you can see that cross shaft. Again, it's 17 millimeters and then about 9 millimeters across. And then this pin is not really supported by the cage like it is on this one. See how this has the cage and we can support that pin there? It's just kind of out there, and then it's got this to keep it from spinning. And then there's 3 bars inside of here. Those bars will be pushed up by the locking mechanism. And what they do is they engage in this guy here. I get that in there correctly. That goes in there like this. When you turn on the magnet, it's basically gonna spin that collar and it's gonna push up the 3 pins in there. So as you can see, that gets pushed down, and that will get pushed down by this spring. That spring sits in there. This thing's a little heavy and awkward, but gives you the idea. So as you engage the locker, it spins this up, pushes up the 3 pins. And then we'll show you what's going on inside of here. You can see this collar here pushes up the pins and it brings up this ring. And that ring is then going to engage into this side gear. This side gear has teeth up here, and in this case, they're not engaged. It allows it to differentiate. And then once you push up the pins, there we go. And now we just locked up that gear. So now what's happening is when you've locked that up, basically stops all your pinion gears and your side gears from rotating. Both your axles are locked into place. So pretty, clever way of doing it. They seem to work pretty well. They're fairly strong. Haven't seen too many issues with the factory stuff. Of course, time will tell. As we start getting more miles on the Grenadiers, people are starting to get 100,000 miles on them. A lot more wear. This should be a serviceable part, and I don't know if INEOS will be supplying differentials for people to get, but clearly we'll be able to either service this component itself or just replace it with the ARB. And then here to top everything else off, here's your other parts. There you go, and then your ring gear would bolt onto here. There we go. Okay. As you look at this differential, you see there's this little nub there. So that nub holds it into place. You're actually just spinning this internal collar here. This one's held stationary with the bearing cap, and then the differential can spin, and then this collar down here will spin, and that engages your locker. And again, just those 3 pins popping up and holding this gear. Here's your return spring. Fairly heavy. Now let's take a look at the ARB. The ARB is a little bit of a cross between the two in the design. Again, same type of components. We've got a nodular cast iron machined housing, all one piece. Keep in mind as you're locking in the gears and you're stopping them from rotating, you're actually trying to blow this thing apart. So as we're stopping all these components, everything's trying to escape from the bucket that it's in. So as you get in here, you're gonna see where they're a little bit different in their construction. It's pretty tidy and tight in there. And then the locking collar is similar, but different, a lot more compact. Here's the pinion cluster, I'm gonna call it. And you can see what they did here is they've got the cage just like the open differential, and they went away from the keyed in slot. Still 17 millimeter like the E-Locker. So that remained the same. Pinion gears are similar. So I'll pull one out real quick for you. Actually, they look almost identical. Maybe a little bit more mass with this, but not much. And then again, 17 millimeter cross shaft in there, and then the cage going around it to support. And you got your side gears, and again, we're gonna have a forged side gear from ARB and all their components. So they have their 2 forged side gears, and then this is the spring. Now, so I'm gonna put this thing together. Okay, so you can see how that kind of goes in, and then there's going to be these 3 pins. Get my hands all dirty, but these 3 pins are going to thread in, and then they're going to keep each one of these pinion shafts from rotating. You can see they're pretty well lubricated from ARB as they sent this to us. So they're running a combination of this cage from the open carrier and the smaller pinions from the E-Locker. This will be your side gear here. And instead of it having this gear here that comes in and pushes in and snaps in on the E-Locker from this direction, it's actually going to have this component here push out, and that's going to engage this gear with that gear, and it will lock this up. Everybody that's building one of these, they usually have like a, like a timing mechanism. Basically, you can engage the locker at pretty much any speed, as long as both tires are on the ground and they're both pretty much running the same rotational speed. If you're tank trapped somewhere and you've got one of them spinning off the ground, you definitely would not want to engage the locker. You'd want to not do that with the E-Locker. As well as we're getting a lot more force out of the ARB, where On this system, you may not get as much force. You're only dealing with the force of the magnet. Where this, you're getting the force of your air locker, which is usually significantly better. And then your return spring will be in here. So we're going to be doing the ARB lockers on our 1924. Along with that, we're going to be doing 488 gears. We're going to be doing a little bit bigger tire on this one. We're going to be getting more torque out of it. And we're looking forward to seeing how well this system works and what kind of strength we're going to get. Obviously, after some time, we'll probably pull this apart, inspect things, but it's looking really, really promising. ARB has been a great company and a great partner with us at Agile Offroad with the Sprinter. We've sold hundreds of them. They've been just fantastic. Their reliability, the way that they operate, as far as the air source and everything and bringing the air into it, all that stuff's been sorted out. So as far as strength and durability from ARB, they've got a great product. It's a two-piece housing, and it's been a while since they had some three-piece housings, but this is a much stronger system. As we're putting it in gears, we offer a 456 and a 48. Keep in mind that that 48 will increase your torque by almost 20%. So we're putting a lot more load on these. As far as durability, we're not seeing an issue with the E-lockers. I'm sure it has its little hang-ups. You know, people talk about like when you go from forward to reverse, that little area where you might come unlocked, little things like that. I don't see it being an issue. Obviously, the open carriers, they're not the most desirable for off-road. The traction control in the INEOS Grenadier is the locker. Keep that in mind. There is not a real traction control system. Traction control is a locker. So with a locker, you've got this in the rough pack available. If you don't have the rough pack, we can upgrade you to the ARB. If for any reason this were to fail on you and it's not covered by INEOS, we can update you to this. There will be advantages where we can shift them in high range, you know, two-wheel drive with a rear locker on in high range like you're doing some dunes or something like that. The babysitter won't be there. You just have to have an air source. As well, you could probably lock the front without the rear. Some of those practices aren't probably the best, but for people that want to do that, they can do that. And as we get into these different gears, 48 gears, we're going to be putting a lot more components. My take on this is that the combination of what ARB has done here with the way that we can operate the unit and as far as the quality, I think we've got a good combination where this is probably slightly better system compacted into that small area. And just the design of it, cross between, you know, adding this cage in there, this one not having the cage, and then having that really, really short 9mm section of that cross shaft. It's a little bit scary. And then as far as the reliability of the ARB, properly installed, this is a reliable source. So we're gonna get started on our 1924. We're gonna do the gears in it. The guys are in R&D are gonna tab it apart, and we'll kind of go through some of that with you and let you see all the steps that we do. Okay, so we've started the process of checking the inventory, what we got from ARB for putting the lockers in the Grenadier. As well, at the same time, we're gonna install 488 gears. So we offer a 488 gear set along with all the bearings, seals, and components. ARB components, they supply you with a line, bulkhead fitting, zip ties, solenoid, O-rings, pretty much everything you need to do the differential. However, for changing out the gear set, you're gonna need a lot more components. So you need your ring and pinion, bearings. And when you're changing out a carrier like this, it's always a good idea to at least minimum replace the carrier bearings. Obviously, when you're doing the ring and pinion, you're gonna be changing out the pinion gears. We've got all those components here. We've even got a diff cover, gaskets. As we go through the process, we'll kind of highlight how the things go, what you're gonna be doing when you're installing it. Right now, the rig's up on the lift. Pretty simple to get it torn apart and get the rear end pulled out. It's always just documenting stuff as you go along. If you've done gears before, this is fairly basic gears. They're just different. The Carrillo axles are completely unique in the seals, the bearings, and that. So they don't really cross over to other vehicles. One thing I'm asked a lot is, what does this size ring and pinion, what does it reflect in, like, say, the Jeep world or I tell people that the crown gear or the ring is basically about the size of a Dana 44. So the diameter of it is very similar to the Dana 44. The pinion, which is really, really big, is similar to a Dana 60. So the bearings for that are extremely large and real robust. So I think that Corolla does a good job on supplying the right components in the right area, so their bearings are very large. It's a crush sleeve style. So here you can see this is the crush sleeve that they use for it. Big nut. This is the brand new one. So we get you the new nut, the new washer, and then we offer the seal, and then an assortment of shims. So these are your pinion shims. The pinion shims do go underneath the pinion bearing, so setting up the pinion depth, you will have to remove the bearing to change out your shim. So, and a replacement seal. We do offer these replacement seals separately, and then we have a special tool for disassembling that. We can show you that when we get more into the video. The rig's been racked. Hasn't pulled the axles out. We'll show you the axles. We have removed the sway bar to get easier access to it. This unit does have the locking differential, the rough pack from factory. So we're gonna be running our bulkhead fitting through here. We'll be just probably blocking off the signal up here because that's just a CAN bus signal and we won't be able to utilize that. But you can see here on the bearing cap, there's this bracket that holds that collar from twisting. So the main collar that the wire's connected to doesn't twist. Here's your main collar with electrical connection. That stays stationary. And this kind of holds it in place, it's got a little bit of float to it. And then this is the collar that slides, and you can see where it's contacting these pins. Remember, there's 3 pins. 2 of them are fairly close together, and then one's on the back side. Those push in all the way through and then connect the side gear to the locking collar over here and lock up that side gear, which in turn locks up the differential. Okay, so part of the disassembly is you do have to remove the axles, both front and rear. We've got the rear kind of taken apart, and you'll see how simple it is to take off the rear. You remove the brake caliper. We've just swung it out of the way so we didn't have to bleed it. 2 bolts here. The rotor will come off. Usually there's a countersink bolt that holds it in place for assembly, and then there's one here. And at this point now, the axle just kind of pops out. And that's the axle. So the axle, it is a full float design. Your bearing's in here. So it's a really, actually super strong design for such a small lug pattern. To give you an idea of pulling apart the rear end, pretty basic pulling it there. Once we get into pulling off the bearing caps, what we've been finding when we pulled the bearing caps, the rear end just falls out. There's literally no preload in there. It will be important for us to add preload for the ARB because the ARB relies on some side load for it to hold pressure on the differential to keep it sealed up. That's where we're at now, and I'll guide you along as we get further in.
Hi, Tom from Agile Offroad here. We have a Grenadier pinion flange off the rear end of our Grenadier. We're going to be taking off the seal. On the Grenadiers, it's actually pressed onto the flange, unlike most domestic applications where it's just pressed into the housing. So we have to press this off. We got our plates here. This supports the underside of the seal, just like that. Spacer. And there we go. In Grenadier terms, this is a mud seal because it's pressed on. We can put on our new one and put on our gears.
All right, so the rear locker is in. I think right now we're just testing that airline, and it seems to be holding fine. 488 gears in, all new bearings. Since this vehicle has a rough pack, we did utilize the port that's in there. The hole's a little bit, maybe a touch big for what it should be, but it should seal up real nice. We've got some good thread sealer in there. And then it's gonna be a clean setup, so it's going right into the boss. But you can see here the copper lines being run, and then our diff cover, which is just like the factory diff cover on the inside. Even though it's nice and heavy duty, we're not interfering with any of this copper line here. Works really well, and I can kind of show you. I can release the air, and it's unlocked. So you can see now we're spinning it. It's differentiating. And then I'll put the air into it. Oops, oh, I left it open. Okay, so there's airs in it. Right, so now we're locked up, and then release the air. And now it'll differentiate between the two, but it's worked out really good. I think we got a little bit of input for ARB on some things that might improve the kit. This is a prototype one. I think they're really close to production. We did notch the main cap here. If you look right here, you'll see where we put like a little notch in there. Gives us a little bit more clearance for this. And then our setup on here was pretty simple. The pattern looks good. You can see our pattern in here where we're really centered up on the tooth really nice. These gears have been great. We've been running them in the Mercedes Sprinter for some time, and now putting them in the Grenadiers, we've probably got, I don't know, 20 or 30 sets out already. No issues, so working really good. So this is a little catch up. This is the rear. We'll knock out the front here, I think today, the rest of the day. Hopefully have this thing on the ground and hopefully running by this weekend. A lot of work to do running the stainless steel lines and where we're gonna put the manifold. Right now we've kind of settled on putting the manifold in the engine compartment, or you can keep the solenoids up out of the way, and also the electrical and everything. We don't want a bunch of stuff hanging underneath that we really don't need. Solenoids purge out air, and they might even purge out, you know, like a mist of oil once in a while, so probably not advisable to have that inside, but we're looking at options now, so we'll show you how that comes out. But it's looking great. Front end's done. We've got the locker set up there. A little bit more work in the front. Obviously, you've got to do a lot more removal of things in there. In the rear, we got the full floaters, so you just take off the brake calipers, axle slide out, diff comes out. We did remove the sway bar to make it easy. If you have a fuel tank or a different exhaust, you'd have to move that, but rear's pretty simple. In the front, you do have to take off your knuckles and your front axles, because we got to remove the front axles. So there's a bit more work involved. Our steering's completely gone, everything. Drag link's just pulled up. This one does have a rough pack, so we are utilizing the ports that INEOS supplied. This one's a little bit tighter on top. We're gonna have to grind out the cast housing up there a little bit so we can get the fitting and get in there and tighten it down. But other than that, things went pretty simple. Again, in the front, we had to notch the bearing cap here. We did that on the rear as well. Just gives us a little bit more room for this line. and then the line's gonna route up here. And then the ports over here, we'll bring up our banjo fitting and then the stainless steel line going up. For the guys here, the job has been fairly straightforward. This setup's been really good. We have all the shims. We actually manufacture the shims through our rear end manufacturer. They've done all of our side shims for us. They're listed on the website. As well, we've got our pinion depth shims that we can set this up. So pattern looks good, both front and rear. Probably tomorrow we'll be test driving this, just final touches in the front, get this thing back together. We still got a lot of plumbing to do, and I can be a little anal on that, so that'll probably take longer than what we're doing here. We'll come up with a kit that has all the lines and where we'd recommend you put the manifold and all that. Should be a real clean installation. Will be separate switches. We can use them independently. We can use them in any speed. We can use them in any gear. You may as well if you can, right? So. Should be fun. We'll be able to run it around, like maybe do some donuts in a snow field in a high range at high speed. So be fun, but everything's going good and excited to get this thing on the trail. One thing I want to point out is the pinion seal that INEOS uses. It's really, really heavy duty. And this thing has been a lot of problems with the way that it leaks, but it's honestly, it's really, really strong. I think that relieving the pressure in the differentials has cured that. But normally a seal is pressed into the differential here, and then there'll be a sealing surface here that will then seal on this surface. But these are actually pressed on there. So what we do is, when we take this apart, when you put the seal into the rear housing, you'll actually press this part in here, and then you'll take the drive flange and you'll bolt the drive flange on, and the drive flange will then slide into the seal, and it presses into the seal itself. So as you look at this seal, you'll see that the seal is actually pivoting here in this area. This is actually, I think, a really good seal. So even though folks have had issues with the way that it has sealed, I think that that's a principle of just too much pressure building up in the housing from the vents getting either stuck or being set too high. And we do have these seals. You can buy these seals on our website. When we're doing a rear end or ring and pinion swap like this, when we pull out the pinion gear, we are going to always replace the seal. That's kind of mandatory. Bearings, probably a good idea too. You know, some people opt to just reuse their pinion bearings. I wouldn't. When you're in there that deep, I just put in new pinion bearings. So, but all these parts are available at Agile, and obviously on this job here, we're doing a complete job, so we're replacing the seals. Job's done. They took it on its first test drive with the gears and the module installed for the 48 gears. No shifting issues, and just a first heat cycle. Today's Friday, I'll be here tomorrow, and I'll probably put another heat cycle on it tomorrow, maybe even both of them. Do 2 more, go through the gears. Pretty happy with the system so far. Super solid one day for sure on the whole project. A little bit more just kind of figuring out how to route things underneath. We've got it kind of dialed in. I'll show you the little manifold that we've got, and it seems to be in a good spot, pretty serviceable. And so we're gonna run our air up into here, and we'll bring the air here. We're really tight to the water bottle filler for the windshield washer, but it's always been tight, so you have to use a funnel. But then we've got a 90-degree fitting here. This will be the air source to power this manifold. I didn't even think about it. We could probably put another air check underneath here. These are the solenoids that are required. We're gonna get power from here. Here's our front, here's our rear, air source. Right now we're just running the ARB lines. They fit right up next to the ARB lines for the breathers. Have to install the switches. We'll do that next week. This one doesn't have a bunch of factory switches in it. There's a panel up there, and I think what we're gonna do is we're just gonna do a standalone and use the ARB switches. I think it's still gonna be really clean. And then we have our onboard air. We'll make sure our onboard air can turn on when you're outside the vehicle and you just need to air up your tires. But at the same time, you'll be able to turn on the onboard air when you use your lockers. So you need to have that control up top. Real happy, the setup's been good. We've got a few notes for ARB. Other than that, this is a good system. Okay, so my take on the ARB lockers, looking through how ARB does stuff, in our experience with them, it's a solid part. Nodular iron housing that they fully machine. They've got all their drop forged gears in there. They shop peen them. They even trace where they and when they've made the gears. So as far as an aftermarket company making a part, really, really sourced well, and they stand behind the product. I don't think there's any issues there. If anything, they took a little bit of the design, you know, if you saw that barrel, how they were supporting the pinion gears in the little shaft, they had that cage. So they took that from how Carrillo made theirs. I have a feeling that's a little bit better setup over what, you know, the E-Locker is. We're not seeing problems with the E-Lockers. The only problems I've seen with E-Lockers is when they've catastrophically failed from a malfunction, probably getting locked up, you know, in high range, going down the freeway or something. But other than that, it's not a prolific problem. Now, as soon as we start putting in new gears, so 456 gears, 48 gears, we're gonna get 20% more torque out of 48s. So we're now gonna be loading that part a little bit more. So instead of putting in a bigger axle, we're putting in just, you know, better parts. So I feel that ARB's got that pretty well covered. And if we get into really, really big tires, you're just gonna have to change the axles, something like what they're doing with, you know, Jeeps now have, Dana 60s used to be big, and now I think they're up to Dana 80s. So that's huge when you're putting those big tires. I think that's a long ways off, or may never be for these, the way that we drive them. We'll be putting 35s on this. BFG came out with a new 35 1150. I spoke with BFG the other day. I don't know when we're gonna have them, but they gave me dimensions on that tire mounted up on a 9.5 inch wide wheel, and it was 34.5 inches on a 9.5. We're gonna be mounting them up onto an 8, so we should be 34.5 plus inches height. So we'll be getting really, really close to that 35 number. Driving it right now with these size tires, the 285 75 17s with 48s, hauls out. It really, really gets up and goes. So solid, real solid. Now, we did something very unique. We took lockers out and put in these lockers. We did this for the benefit of ourselves because we only owned a vehicle with rough pack. As well, we're supplying ARB with information on when that conversion happens. Let's say you're out of warranty, your E-lockers fail. We have a solution for you, and everything fit. We were able to use the existing ports, so we didn't have to drill a new hole in the housing. You know, we reamed it and then tapped it out. Time will tell on that, but we don't see any issue with it. Great upgrade. ARB is a solid company. My view is it's a great option for folks, especially if you don't have lockers. You can add lockers. If you need replacements down the road, you can do replacements down the road. You don't need to run out and replace your E-lockers unless you break them. Last little part of the video will be the switches, how we do the switches. And we're just gonna put in the ARB switches right in the blank spot, because this is the 1924 and it doesn't have the auxiliary switches in it. We might, because they show a picture of a Jeep on there, we might get them custom logoed with a Grenadier. The headlights in the front, and maybe the different door offset in the rear, because it was kind of Jeepish. So we'll customize that. But other than that, I think it's gonna be a clean setup. And running the air up into here, this will give us powering the manifold. And after just looking at this spare fitting here, we could probably just run another alternative air source up underneath here, you know, for airing up tires or whatnot. So let's take a look at how we've done the switches on the inside. This is our 1924. It came with lockers factory, and then it did not come with the auxiliary switches that INEOS supplies right here. So what we've done is we've installed an additional panel, and then we're using a brand called Carline. These are the switches that come in the ARB kit. You do have to do a small modification to the back panel that's underneath this. You have to just trim or return so the switch sits in there. And then we printed up a new faceplate. We might change this a little bit, but right now it's working great. We've got an additional 4 switches up here, they're the Carline. So we got onboard air, And then we've got rear locker, and then we got front locker. So as fast as that was done, those just engaged. The vehicle's not in gear, it's not in low range. I literally locked the lockers right there. And then you turn them off. Now, right now I've got them set up the way that ARB has them designed. The front locker is getting its power from the rear locker switch. So the rear locker switch has to be on to power that. You can run an additional wire between these two. So if you wanted to, you could turn on just the front locker only, and that will kind of simulate like a dig. If you don't need traction in the rear, you just want front traction only, you can actually just install your hot wire this, and you can have your front locker come on only. It's not super common, but might be something that some people will want. Right now it's set up the way that ARB's got it designed, so when I turn off the two lockers, I can actually just hit the rear locker only, and it shuts off both of them. And then when I want to engage the lockers again, I turn the rear locker on, engages both front and rear. You're gonna hear the pump cycle. We're basically using the line, coming from the solenoid all the way to lockers to activate them. You're gonna hear that when you cycle it back and forth, like I can simulate it again here. And then if you're just doing one locker, yeah, you'll notice it's shorter, but when you're doing two, you gotta fill up both airlines. And then as well, we can turn off the whole system up here. Now right now the key's just on, so we're not in low range, we're not in any simulation, so you can see how easy that was. As well, when you're on the trail, and if you just want to air up your tires, you can come down here and you can just turn on the onboard air here. Right now it will turn on this system up here. I think if we just simply install the diode in there, it won't backfeed up into here, and we might want to do that because right now I could turn on the locker by turning that switch on. So we may not want that. So that's the interior setup. I think it's pretty nice. People have asked about us if you were gonna install them on the factory locker switches. Probably doesn't make sense. These are momentary switches. They're also on a CAN bus system. It's gonna get its signals from certain things. Probably not ideal. Now this is a unique one where we've got a vehicle equipped with lockers. I feel that most of our installs are gonna be the people that don't have them. And then as well, they won't be having the up there switches. So this will be kind of the base installation. For the system to be on, you need to be keyed on. Air compressor on, rear locker, front locker. And then we could turn those off in this order, and you leave on the air compressor or turn that off. You can also go on, on, on. You can turn both off here and then both back on this way if you leave this one down. As well, you can kill the whole system by turning off the compressor. And again, if you turn this on, it won't activate. Turn that one on, it won't activate. But now I turn on the air, we get all of them lighting up. The ARB is the legend showing you that the system is activated. Right now I'm fully locked, turned off, I'm fully off. Back to locked, and I can keep the air on, and I can remove power from both of these simultaneously by just removing this, or I can remove front, just have rear, and that. Now if we did hot wire this, all we have to do is run the 12-volt feed from this, bring it over into here, and if we wanted to, we could turn on this one using the 12-volt source that normally would be coming from this switch in the on position, and it's a simple little thing. This thing simply bolts in with the 3 screws here. There's 2 screws here, and the whole panel drops down, and it's easy to do. A safety thing for somebody to consider is, let's say you're driving down the road and you accidentally, you had your onboard air on for some reason, and somebody accidentally were to hit that. Probably unlikely, but let's say they did, and you turn on your front only locker going down the freeway, would not be a good thing. So the solenoid and manifold are right here. This is the manifold. We did manufacture this bracket here, and we'll powder coat this, and then we will possibly redo the manifold to where these will thread right in. But this one has a 1/8 BSP thread going into a 1/4 inch adapter, and we supply all those parts. So we're taking our air source, this -4 line here, we're running this underneath the radiator support. Actually, this is just kind of like a radiator cowl support, and then there's a wiring harness underneath there. You'll notice we've got our wiring here. We're pulling into the ground right here in the fender well, and then we've got our green and yellow, which are designating between front and rear. When we activate the switch, we're opening this valve or opening this valve. And this is our rear and this is our front. Rear is yellow and front is green. So as you follow along here, you're gonna notice this line here and the wire join up here, go underneath the cowl here, then we're gonna join them back again here. We run along here, really nice and straight. It's real important that you keep this away from any power source. This is like a bare wire, especially if you're running stainless steel line. In our kit, we will be making this coated. We're gonna drop down in here. There's a big rubber boot right down in here that has a factory wiring. Really hard to see, we might be able to see it underneath. Yeah, I can pull this back and you can see it. You can get it in there. So here's the stainless steel line. This is a big boot, there's a lot of room. And then we've taken the tape off and then we've retaped it. We wanna make sure that this stays nice and tight, so in case you weighed your vehicle, it'll still keep its rating. And then this is the air supply. This is gonna go underneath the seat. This is the green and the yellow going up to the overhead console. And then as well, we're gonna have a power from underneath the seat that's gonna join this and go up over the top. So we needed 3 wires going into the top. Underneath the seat where our air is, you can see a small bit of the line here and the wire right here. This is the power to turn on this compressor from the overhead console. And again, I think we'll add a diode into here so that when we turn this on here, we won't backfeed into the top. That'd be a pretty simple thing. Compressor still in the factory location. You still have your source here. We'll supply a T, because there's gonna be a T underneath there that will allow you to have air to here and then air to your manifold up underneath. So if you have the Agile onboard air system, we'll have you all dialed in with all the hardware you need. And even if you have the single system underneath the rear seat, we'll have that set up too. Okay, remember when I talked about jumpering the wires so that when you have the air compressor on, you can turn on the front locker only without having the rear locker on? Let me show you how that's done. So let's look at the wiring harness from ARB. Basically, this is your, they call it the isolation switch. That's your air compressor switch. This is your front locker, this is your rear. Inside of here, you got a couple of grounds, you got a blue one, which is your backlight, then you got your power, and then you got your solenoid, which is yellow. Yellow's for the front. And then the back, you're gonna see the same thing, ground, illumination. You're gonna see your green for the wire going back, but you're gonna see a yellow. The yellow is actually tied off of this yellow, and it is becoming the power. So this one's getting 12 volts into the switch. When you power and turn on the front locker, that yellow comes out, comes into the harness. One splits up here and one goes down to the solenoid. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna eliminate this wire, and I'll show you what we've done here. So basically, the red power that was coming into switch number 1, we are gonna jump that over to replace the yellow, which is getting its power when this is turned on to switch 2. We're just gonna pop that guy down here and we're gonna jump that. What this will enable us to do is have the air compressor on and the front locker on independently from the rear locker. And in this case, it'll kind of simulate like a front dig, like you'll have traction only in the front and a solid axle pulling you up with both tires spinning simultaneously, while in the case of the rear, it's gonna be open and allowing the rear to kind of flop around, so to speak, because it won't be bound up. It won't be trying to drive the vehicle forward. You'll just be dragging it up. As far as it being a simple thing, now you can see how simple it was. Remove the yellow, add the red, jumper it over from here. And then here's our Rev 1 that we did, and here's a new one. We're gonna try putting that in there and seeing what that looks like. I think this will look a little bit cleaner, and it will still have the factory switches here, and then the ARB switches up here. We'll check it out. A couple of last minute updates that I wanted to do. Now, for the remote location, I added a diode in here. So when you turn this on here, you no longer get the on up at the top. So that will stay off. That was a simple diode. One other last little thing we did run the jumper wire so we can run the front locker only. That was pretty simple. And a different panel up here. I think it looks cleaner. We got air on, that's rear locker, and then that's front locker. So they work independent. So you no longer need to have the rear on to turn on the front. So. All right. ARB lockers are a big success installing in the Grenadier. If you don't have lockers, this is, in my opinion, if you plan to take your Grenadier off-road, it's a must-have. The traction control system is the lockers. You pretty much just have a stability control program that might help you in certain situations off-road. But if you're planning to take your Grenadier off-road, if you're doing expeditions, whatever, you're gonna rely on lockers for your traction control. So if you do not have lockers factory in your Grenadier, you're gonna want to do this. We have gear ratio changes, 456s and 48s. This Grenadier has 48s. So we're gonna put on a bit bigger tire than what most are running. Those will be here fairly soon. This weekend, I'm gonna take this rig out and we'll be using it in the dirt. I think we've got close to 500 miles on the gear set and the lockers. Everything's been perfect. We've cycled them many, many times. Everything's worked out very, very well. Real happy with the installation, the way that it came about, and how simple it is, and how the overhead console, we can tie into that. Running the wires, running the manifold, through the boot, the air source wire through the boot, the additional wires. The Grenadier's got some great access for some aftermarket parts. And the more we work on this vehicle, the more we like them. So you don't have lockers, ARB has you set. You don't have lockers and you want to put on bigger tires and you want more torque or bring you back to your factory torque specs, Agile has 456s and 48 gears to bring that torque back and enable you to go off-road that much better. We'll report back if there's any issues, but it doesn't look like we're gonna have any problems. We've been doing lockers for some time now. Routing of the wires and setup of the gear and all that is primarily where things can go wrong. And I feel like we've got this really, really dialed in. So stay tuned for more. But lockers will be here right now. We're in June. I would anticipate us seeing gears here towards the end of the year. We've got a little bit of input to give ARB. If they did it as is, I think we'll be fine. We'll be installing gears and lockers towards the end of this year for people that don't have them. Keep in mind, if you do want to check out more, get more information and updates, go to our website. I believe you just type in ARB Locker, it will bring you to a page. We'll try and upload that page with as much detail as we can. Pictures, things like that. We'll try and get better pictures of the interior and post them on there so people can see how we're doing the switches and whatnot. Because there is no instructions for this as far as the layout. So it's going to be up to your installer to do a nice job. And we feel that we've got a really good setup here. All right, everybody, thanks. Happy trails.